It's time once again that we take a look at what's happening in the world of tabletop gaming. Now, this week we've got companies absorbing other companies, we've got a world record broken, and we've got 2 new game announcements that are probably going to be the talk around the table. What are those games? Well, you'll have to wait and see as we find out what's in this week's news roundup for May 1st, 2024. Now, our first story is actually 3 stories wrapped up in one because they're basically the same thing. One company acquired a second one. Now, the first one, which is probably going to be the biggest or the one that most people would recognize in the world of tabletop gaming, involves CMON. CMON acquired the company Japan Brand. Now, Japan Brand was a company that tried to match Japanese board game designers and publishers with international publishers, allowing them to bring the game to a much larger marketplace. Many games have gone through them, though one of the most notable ones that you've probably heard of is Love Letter. Now, CMON has officially acquired the company, though they have stated that Japan Brand will continue to serve as an independent agent division, leveraging CMON's infrastructure and management capabilities to introduce new games to the global market. My guess is what the idea here is, 1, CMON basically is going to be able to get first pick if there's any good-looking games to release to an international market, and 2, I imagine CMON might use this as a way to break into the Japanese marketplace, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're doing research on trading card games. Partially because 1, Fantasy Flight has already been doing well with their new Star Wars trading card game internationally, and 2, when it comes to tabletop games, trading card games are what really sell well in Japan. And it's actually a much more competitive market, so much so that Magic the Gathering, one that most people assume is one of the biggest ones out there, often referred to when it back to the old Big 3 and now Big 5, actually has a much tougher time in Japan as there's a lot more competition. I would not be surprised if we see a new trading card game coming from CMON in the next 2 or so years. But moving from there, sticking with the country of Japan, Kadokawa has acquired ArcLight Games. Now, ArcLight Games actually did something a little similar when it came to the Japan Brand, but it is also responsible for actually bringing international games into Japan, translating them and releasing them there for the marketplace. Now, Kadokawa seems to be more of a major media conglomerate. In particular, they seem to have a big investment in manga and light visual novels. They stated that they're trying to match these two up, possibly bringing the properties they have in the manga and light novels into board games and vice versa. This could be really cool depending on what different properties they have and maybe bring some more interesting styles to board gaming. And of course, it'd be really cool to see maybe some of the board games we know and love actually get their own little mini short series in a manga. That said, I have a bad feeling that the only way we'll find out about these is if you already read Japanese or if they get fan translated, because this feels like the kind of thing that won't actually leave Japan. That said, though, it could happen, and maybe next time you go to your big board game convention, you'll also be picking up the newest novels of Catan while you're at it. Finally, though, and this one's for the miniature gamers out there, Monolith Board Games acquired Rackham's assets. Now, this one's a little different as the previous 2, as Rackham was a company that was actually having a bunch of financial issues starting around 2007. So what Monolith got here was basically all their games and rights, rather than getting a company to add and give them more capabilities or reach in different marketplaces. The biggest game that Rackham was known for was a game called Confrontations, so I assume that we'll see this game get a new lift from Monolith Games sometime in the future. Our next story is also taking place in Japan and is about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series recently held in Tokyo. Now, these are the tournaments that decide who's going to be the representative, the final people in the World Championship. And this year, they broke the record for the largest trading card game tournament with attendees. This year, they had a total of 7,443 attendees, meaning that they broke the world record that was, well, it was also held by Yu-Gi-Oh! For a tournament they held back in 2012 in Long Beach, California. Now, this is very impressive, partially because they also just added new rules that would limit who can take part in their championship series strictly in Japan. So obviously, this shows that there's still quite a large interest, and maybe it's sort of good now that they have these limitations that they're still breaking world records for attendance. Now, I wonder, since this one was more limited, and I don't believe the championship series for other countries were, if that means the people who maybe didn't do well here might go and try out in those other championship series, meaning we may see this record broken very shortly in the future. RPGs have become extremely popular over the last few years, with more people wanting to play them online for the ease of use rather than meeting up in person. This has caused multiple websites to grow in size, one of the most well-known ones being Roll20. That said, for me personally, even when playing on one of these websites, and honestly, most online games in general, we don't tend to use the chat function in the program or game. Rather, we go through Discord. So Roll20 decided, why not we just throw it all together then if everyone's going to use it. They announced that Roll20 is going to be integrated into Discord, meaning that if you use Roll20, you can just boot up Discord and do everything through that. Now, if you have the same email attached to both your accounts, you're basically going to have a seamless transition. If not, you're going to have to go through some extra steps. They're currently testing it as of just like a few days ago of this recording, so you're going to be hearing more and more about it, but this should be an easier way for you to get your tabletop game started. That said, this will not remove the difficulty of getting everyone's schedules to line up. Finally, the Golden Geek nominees for this year are out, and you can go vote on which one you think should win each category, including the top game of the year for both light, medium, and heavy. Now, the one thing I do want to point out, just more because I find it interesting, is that Thunder Road Vendetta is on the list for light game of the year. And this is interesting because last week I talked about the American Tabletop Awards, where it won strategy, where that was like basically the second to last heaviest game title award they have. So it's very interesting to see where this game lands and whether it's a very light, simple game, whether it's much more heavy. What does this mean? And honestly, it comes down to the audience that each group is looking at, as well as the judges, something that I just find to be interesting when compared side by side. Regardless, you can go vote now. And of course, when they actually announce the winners, I'll talk about them. So hopefully, whatever you vote for turns out to win its category. Now on to game announcements, though. The first two games are basically their own story, so they're going to get their own little timestamp so people can just click and see what's going on there. The first one is from Stonemaier Games, and that's the new game they announced, Vantage. This has been a game that apparently Jamie Stegmaier has been working on for over 7 years and is based on a lot of big open world games such as Zelda Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring, and The Witcher 3. It is actually a roguelike style game where you and up to 5 other players, 1 to 6 player count, will crash land on a planet. You will actually not be together. You can communicate and talk, but really it's up to you to survive. This is a game that you either win or lose, and the knowledge you gain either way will help you in the next playthrough. So it's not really a campaign. Rather, like I said, the roguelike or knowledge is what's going to help you slowly inch your way towards victory. Now, this game is still in the works, and they stated that they don't think it's going to be come out till like mid 2025, aka Gen Con 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if this game either becomes everyone's favorite game for 2025, or it's just so weird that it turns off a lot of people. But I'm curious to see nonetheless. The other game we need to talk about is actually a Star Wars game. This game is titled Mandalorian Adventures, and it is all about, well, the Mandalorian. It's about the first season, and you will actually play as one of the 8 characters there, going through a bunch of missions, a little bit like Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. You have a book that has different maps as you play through the first season. Now, what's interesting is this is not a Fantasy Flight game, who usually publishes all the Star Wars games, but rather from Unexpected Games, who was founded by Corey Konechka, who, if you didn't know, helped design a lot of the Star Wars games at Fantasy Flight. So it's interesting. It's almost like they went back to the well, but they wanted to keep the original designers rather than the company that owns them. So this has a lot of people super excited, not partially because also, The Mandalorian's probably everyone's favorite current Star Wars story right now. Outside of, I think, Andor might be the only thing that competes with it. So a lot of people are really excited and happy that they'll also get their hands on it very soon. It has a release date around August 2nd, once again, around Gen Con. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the hot item to pick up this year. But we've got some other games to talk about as well, so let's quickly go through them. First, we've got Tales of the Arthurian Knights. This is actually the sort of updated sequel to Tales of Arabian Nights. I really love that one. Yes, it's a bit clunky, but it was one of those games you just have fun on the journey rather than trying to reach the end. So I'm super excited to see what this one does, whether it fixes some of that the jankiness, so to speak, as well as, Arthurian lore is also really cool. Then, for all the people who've been enjoying the new X-Men 90s cartoon, Jubilee is joining Marvel Champions in her new hero pack. You can pick up her this July 19th. Then Warhammer has an interesting miniatures thing. It's not just to be added to one of their games, rather it's a standalone game titled, well, Warhammer Darktide. This is actually based off the video game series, and like the video game series, you will play as one of the 4 heroes, quote unquote, going through different missions, just like in the game, having to complete different objectives. Now, to my knowledge, these minis will be usable in their other games, such as Kill Team, I think was the one they said, but probably as well in the regular 40K style, as long as you're in the right faction. But if you enjoy something that's a bit more cooperative experience, or at least tabletop-wise, once again, based on a video game, you can still pick up this game if you're interested. Another Warhammer-related thing, though, but this time it's Munchkin, is a new expansion for the Munchkin Warhammer Age of Sigmar. This one titled Dire Domains Expansion. You can pick this up this September. Now, Keyforge has 2 announcements, and they're both special sets. Apparently, special sets just means they're a bit different in terms of what they bring to the table, quote unquote, which actually makes some of them not tournament legal. In this case, the first one, Menagerie, is actually pulling from all the different sets in terms of its power and keywords, which apparently really just shuffle things up and unfortunately will mean it's not tournament legal, but probably still has some cool decks in it. And you can pick that up probably now, if not very soon, as they said the release at the beginning of May. The other one is titled Tokens of Change. And you can probably guess from the name, it's all about tokens. Every pack you open will have some way to at least generate tokens. And this one will be tournament legal and be released later this year. Finally, we have another interesting secret layer from Magic the Gathering. This one, another Beyond Universe, is for all the Hatsumiko fans out there. Hatsumiko is going to have not only 1, but 4 different secret layers. Currently, the one we see is inspired by spring, with the 3 ones we'll receive later being inspired by, well, the other seasons. Now, you can pick this up relatively soon. The secret layer will drop May 13th. But that is all we have for this week. Let me know your thoughts on any of the news stories, or are you super excited about the 2 new game announcements I started at the top of the new game announcement section? Let me know what you're thinking about in the comments down below. And also let me know if you're voting on the Golden Geek nominees and what you voted for. I'd love to hear everything you have to say, but for now, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on the News Roundup.